right where you are. I know many of you did not get a chance to finish that, and I apologize. Well, actually, I don't apologize, but we just don't have time for to go through all of that. But and I don't want to know what you have pluses and minuses in. That's none of my business. That's for you to kind of think about what you learn and why you learn different things. But I am curious as to what kinds of things came up for you, either thoughts or emotions came up for you as you were going through that chart. What came up for you? Yes.
I feel blessed by the family that I grew up in and the people that I've surrounded myself with. Education, which should be a firm place to deal with issues like this, hasn't always been.
Okay.
Teachers have not always been who they should have been.
Okay. So I think that's funny. She said teachers haven't always been who they should have been. And sometimes I look at myself and I'm not always who I should be either, right? But you felt blessed by your family and being able to get that education at home. All right. Other folks, what did you think about? Yes, ma'am. You were surprised at how much negativity you learned. All right, you were surprised by the amount of negativity that you got. All right, other folks. Yes, ma'am.
How much it really made you think. You really had to try to throw it away.
Yeah.
How much really was positive and how much really wasn't negative, and how much was a flat line. Sometimes some nationalities you didn't hear anything about from your parents.
Yeah.
You heard like from other kids,
Yep.
maybe calling you names and stuff like from their parents.
Yep. And so in a lot of ways, there are tons of these pluses and minuses that we get, and sometimes we don't get stuff from our parents, but we get it from our peers. And it's so funny, when I taught high school, and parents would, I have to call home because there's bad behavior, and the parents are like, well, I taught Johnny better than that. That's not my Johnny. And I'm like, really? And you meet the parents and they're just the nicest, sweetest folks, and you realize that the way they act with their parents is quite different than when they're with their peers in school. And so your friends are extremely important to who you are. So there's that. Other things that people thought or what came up for you? Yes, ma'am. All right, cool. That your personal experiences have been rich, even though growing up you were very restricted in your exposure. Yes, sir.
I was raised on a small country farm, and I was always amazed by mostly extended family, aunts and uncles, that had opinions about certain races of people, but had no experience, to back that up. Of course, I didn't know that then, I know that now.
Yeah, how many people have heard these, we call them, because we live in the city now, urban legends about diversity stuff, tales that people would, things they would say about groups of folks, or tales that they would tell because they heard it from somebody else, or they knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody that this thing happened, What's a way that we can crack that open and expose it for what it is? Question it. Like, really? Who? Well, I mean, it was a friend of a friend of a friend. What's their name? Right? And really help people to kind of analyze their stuff. Yes, sir, and I'll take your hand, ma'am.
And I think some of it was a person had an experience with one or two individuals, and that's a personal thing, characterized it as race.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am, I'll take your hand. You had raised your hand earlier, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's fine. Someone else already brought it up.
Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am. And then,
I realized that I'm suppressing some emotions around my experiences, and learn these things. That kind of brought them out until I was able to think about it.
okay. She said she had suppressed emotions about some of the things that she learned or some of the interactions that she had until she was forced to think about it. Why do you think we do that? Why do we suppress that kind of stuff? I mean, you guys are social workers. It's to protect ourselves. And we typically want to protect ourselves, most importantly, from our number one threat, which is us. And so if I have an idea of who I am and that gets rattled, then I start to try to create an environment where I don't feel hurt. But how many people exercise? When you exercise, are there times that you actually, the next day, you hurt? But what do you know about that kind of pain? That not only it goes away, but what does that pain do for you? It is a clue that you are what? Getting stronger, right? It's a clue that you're getting stronger. But if you're in the exercise and it hurts, stop, because that means you're doing something wrong. You know. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Well, since I grew up in overseas, in the United States, that's the time for me it's easy to raise easily. And really, I shrink, and I'm shrinking daily with the frustration. So, when my parents raised me, the neighborhood I grew up from home, where I am now, because I'm too old.
She said, coming to the United States, the way she feels is though she's shrinking as a person. That racism is so prevalent that she actually feels like she's shrinking. She's getting smaller. And yeah, so I'm going to get to some other stuff in just a minute. Other thoughts or feelings? Yes. Yep. And I mean, that's what she was saying was how different her life has been than how she was raised. And the kinds of things she's done to kind of counteract or contrast the way that she was raised. And I think that's all of us try to, or we're supposed to build on what our parents built on. Some of the problems, though, was that our parents were in mud, sinking. And so when we try to build on what they build on, we're just a little bit behind of other folks. And so we have to figure out ways to fortify ourselves and do the best that we can with what we have. Right? So why is race such a difficult thing to talk about? Yes, ma'am. What's that? You don't want to offend anyone, okay? Yes, ma'am.
There's a lot of pain.
There's a lot of pain behind it, all right?
I don't know what it is.
You don't know what it is.
Not always.
Okay, not always.
It doesn't fit into the little boxes
Okay.
on the forms.
Yeah, it doesn't fit into the boxes on the forms because those boxes and forms change from time to time. Vicki, you were going to say something?
It's emotional.
It's emotional. All right, so race is emotional. Yes, ma'am.
Ignorance. I'm an immigrant. I don't know what happened in the past. So it's kind of like a why.
Yep. And she says she's a new immigrant. She doesn't know what happened in the past. And so part of her question is, why is it a big deal? But there's a whole context in the United States that we don't talk about as to why it's a big deal. And yes, ma'am.
It can be received to be harsh or interpreted to be a conflict.
Okay, it can be interpreted as being a conflict or being harsh. Yes.
You can talk. If you think the other person is talking is making sense, but if he or she is not making sense, so waste of time to talk.
Okay, so you feel that it's a waste of time to talk to people if you don't think they're going to make a change. And part of what we talked about yesterday is that as helpers, we can never give up on people. We can't give up on people. Even if they show us consistently their bad behavior as something that is probably not going to change, we still can't give up on them because there is that element of surprise that the human being is able to do. And so I want to talk a lot about this concept of race because I think we've been duped. I think we've been tricked, bamboozled, hoodwinked into buying or swallowing a pill that is a placebo, if you will. So I want to show some videos. I wanted to talk a little bit about Sarah Hartman. I was going to show a video about her. I'm sorry, let me make sure. Bartman. So not Hartman, Bartman. Sarah Bartman, who was a South African woman. Please do some YouTube search on her. She was a South African woman. She went to Europe to be she thought she was going to do entertainment stuff, and she turned out to be, they turned her into kind of a freak show. She was a very robust woman with really, with wide hips and big bosoms and that kind of stuff. And they used her and abused her, and ultimately they dehumanized her to the point that they actually took her skin, her physical body, and created a museum piece. So she is a museum piece now in Europe. And so I wanted to talk about in the concept of race as one that dehumanizes people. That once we don't see people as equal as us, then all bars are off. One of the things, anyone served in the armed services? In the military? Okay. Fraternization with combatants, is that encouraged? No. Why is it not encouraged? The enemy.
Well, because you don't want to be influenced or you don't. My view is that you don't want to humanize them. You don't want to find out that they're not your family.
Yeah.
Got families, brothers.
It's funny. I was talking with a woman at work, and we're talking about this kind of dehumanizing stuff, right? So her son bought a truck that had some stuff on it already. So it had a Confederate flag on the truck, and so she talked to her son, and she didn't try to convince him of anything. She was just like, I want you to research it and tell me if you think that flag should still be on your car. And so he did, and he came to the realization that this is not something that he wanted on his truck. So he took it off. Well, there are also on this truck that he bought, and this was stuff that was already on here. And I don't know if you've seen them, but they're the silhouettes of naked ladies, and they one like with their knee up, kind of arched back and that kind of stuff. And so, that was her next project. So she was like, do some research and see if this is something that you want on your truck. It's not something I encourage. And he didn't have a hard time with the Confederate flag thing, but he really is wrestling with these silhouettes of chicks on his car. And I find it interesting because although some of us may say that racism is our big thing, how much does that carry over into other parts? And I don't want to tip my hand too much or talk about reflections in the past, but I do think that sometimes in the black community in particular, when we were going through the civil rights stuff, we were so focused on brotherhood and working with the guys that sometimes we left our sisters behind. or we didn't bring them along at the same level. And so, and a lot of times when we talk about man, we actually are talking about what it means to be human. And so I think it's important that we keep those things in mind. So I'm going to show a couple of video clips. They may be, somewhat disturbing to folks. And I don't think there's any stark language or anything, but some of the concepts are kind of interesting. And these are current conversations. These aren't things that happened 100 years ago, 50 years ago, or even 10 years ago. These are conversations that are happening now around race. And I want us to have some conversations about what we see from these videos. So, my hope. It's my hope that this will be loud enough. Yes, sir.
You were talking, we were asked it earlier why we don't talk about this. One of the things that we do is that it's very profitable for society to perpetuate racism.
One of the, he just said, one of the things that we also don't talk about is how profitable it is. And I would say both financially as well as individually to profit from the concept of race and its product, racism. So I'm going to show this video. So yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to. This is kind of a free flow. Actually, this is good. Yes, ma'am.
I have a television program, cable television program that I've been on about 18 years,
Yes, ma'am.
throughout the Twin Cities and 7 counties in the Superior. And I teach that there is only one race. And I ask people, what race are you in? I said, I'm the one in the race that's the human race.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
said, and I teach that, but I've never been challenged. I know they challenge me in their lifestyle or what they think. And no one has ever been able to say that there is more races. I teach that there's just one race. I teach many innumerable cultures,
Yes,
but
ma'am.
only one race.
But only one race.
And that's the one I
Now, and I have to tell you, I came to that, but it was hard. It was a hard pull to get to that, particularly because my identity was so, particularly growing up in the household that I grew up in, was so linked with being black that it was hard to pull myself away from that. And I think sometimes people get the misconception that if you say, there's only one race, that you're trying to deny who you are, you're trying to deny other people. But it's so crucial that we start having that kind of conversation, that it doesn't matter. This stuff is less important than other things. All right. This gentleman is a prominent scientist. He is a psychologist that is becoming world renowned for who he is and what he talks about. And he's kind of coined himself as a race psychologist. And we'll just listen to some of the stuff that he says. Let me see if I can turn this light out. That might be helpful. And maybe turn these lights on. Well, sort of. Is there another switch? Or no? Okay. That'll just have to work.
But one example, which is a sad example really, if you have a pair of highly intelligent black couple, they're married, they have good paying jobs, $200,000 a year, and they go and they live in an upper middle class neighborhood. They have a lot of upper middle class blacks, and they have great aspirations for their child. They're expected to go to Harvard and win the Nobel Prize, whatever. And there is a big problem. More often than not, the black children just don't do well in school. They don't do anything like what their parents did in school. And they bring in a psychologist and they find out this person have a lower IQ. Where did this lower IQ possibly come from? They gave him everything. And of course, blame white racism or black cultural attitudes, but it's predictable from regression to the mean because children regress to the mean. This is very well known biological fact. There's a great race horse that wins the Derby and all the other great events. And you put them out to stud, all his offspring, they're great horses, but they're nothing like the father beside him. So there's regression to the mean. And it works at the other end. There's very low IQ parents. The children actually do better than you might have expected because this is biological regression. Well, black children regress more towards the black mean, which is lower, than white children do. So it's a statistical argument that explains real life phenomena.
Okay. Now he's speaking at a conference, just like I'm speaking at a conference. He's got hundreds of people in the audience, and he's teaching folks that, folks, we de-evolve in a sense, that we digress as opposed to evolve. Because supposedly we're constantly evolving, right? I mean, that's some of the contemporary scientists talk about the fact that, we are, we were fish, then we were, animals, and then we were apes, and here we are, and we're going to continually evolve. But he seems to say something different. Yes, ma'am.
Also comparing exactly to a horse. He's not saying other white men. He's comparing to an animal, which is another. Not animal.
Other thoughts?
Well, then why would it be that the white race is not digressing to the point that the black is like saying that black people are stupid to begin with? And so we're going back to the stupidity, supposed stupidity that we had when we were back in Africa. So it's like a white institutionalized racism that's being expressed by this man. Maybe there's some statistics to back up because sometimes these things are
Okay.
white children.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Because part of the fault in the logic is that facts equal the truth. Facts do not equal the truth. And I talked about this in my other sessions, that I used to be a Scorpio. I'm now a Libra. Right? The constellations changed. They added a new zodiac. I mean, the whole thing is different. So facts don't equal the truth. Facts are a snapshot of what I know and what I think today. But what we try to do is collect those facts to say, well, this is what it's going to be in the future. We don't know what's going to be in the future. Right? Who would have thought that that Japan would have moved 8 feet as a result of this earthquake? Who would have thought that? Right? So what we know today is what we know today. And part of our problem is we typically take statistics and try to prove stuff that's not really related. One of my favorite books and movies, and if you get a chance to read or see either, is Freakonomics. Because they do a really good job of taking unrelated things and making them related. Which tells me that there are tons of ways that we can relate stuff and we can make stuff say what we want it to say. Right? Yes, ma'am.
Politics.
What's that?
That's politics.
It's called politics. All right?
I was going to say that's why that's the choices that they're making. Which facts you choose to compare with. And that's like when you say that when you say the upper class family and the child, you can get any race with upper class family and the child with that because maybe the child is not getting pushed. Maybe the child is getting so much fun stuff, you say, I'm not going about it. I know I can get this and something like that. So that's not a race thing, it's how that household is being run individually.
So one of the things that I had epiphany about the other day, so doing that chart, and I'm in the session, and it hits me that when I thought about the negatives that I had about some of those people in that chart, I had negatives about the group, right? Or zeros about the group. But when I thought about my positives, I had positive individuals. There were individuals that I could think of that were the positives. So it wasn't the whole positive about the group, but it was about individuals that I had relationships with that gave me the positive about that group, right? And I think the same thing kind of carries over. I'm going to show a couple of other videos because one I thought was very interesting because it was done in Britain, and it's about us in Minnesota. So that was, I thought that was interesting. How did you turn off all of those lights on that side?
On the back of the door.
Okay, because we did the same thing over here. We got
There's another light.
okay. All right. Boom! Okay, so turn that one, yeah, because I don't want them going to sleep. Because some of y'all party hard, I heard. Woo! So here we go. They'll say his name in the next clip. Because they do an interview with him. So.
It seems to me the whole idea of some races being cleverer than others also hinges on races really being different. So is there any scientific validity in classifying people according to the color of their skin? I'm going to begin by hearing from someone who thinks there is. I've travelled to Minneapolis to meet a British-born psychology professor, J. Philip Rushton. He's probably the most controversial of the small number of academics who are prepared to say that there is a racial hierarchy in intelligence. Rushton's work has been strongly condemned by many psychologists and geneticists. Nonetheless, he is a fellow of the American Academy for the Advancement of Science. I want him to explain to me why he thinks people that look like him are likely to be cleverer than people who look like them.
You said in your work that race is more than skin deep.
Sure.
What do you mean by that?
DNA will tell you a racial classification, but so will most internal organs, bones, for example. If you actually find a skeleton in your back garden, and you call in the police and they call in some anthropologists, they will be able to tell from even the thigh bone or the skull whether you're looking for a male or a female, what age they are, what race they are, because the races differ. So if they weren't able to do that, it would mean that races didn't exist. But because they can do that, implies that races do exist.
You've also written quite a bit about the different pelvic sizes between races. Why is that important, and what does it lead to?
East Asian women do have a larger pelvis than European women, on average. And European women do have a larger pelvis than black women, and that's probably due to the fact that they give birth to larger brain babies.
What about brain sizes between men and women? Are they different?
Yes, they are.
So women are less intelligent than men.
The differences between men and women's brains are due to spatial ability, but the differences between black and white and East Asian brains is due to general intelligence. That's what we think is the situation.
Even though women have smaller brain sizes than men, they're just as intelligent as men, but black people have smaller brain sizes than white people, but they're not as intelligent as white people.
That's correct. As an average, yes.
So intelligence is biologically fixed.
Yeah, fixed is maybe too strong a word.
Biologically determined.
Yeah, for sure. You are born with a genetic potential for a particular brain size.
What then are the genes that determine intelligence? What are they? Can you name them?
We don't know the specific genes, but we know that genes are absolutely crucial
from behavior genetics studies.
So how do I test these claims? Rushton's a psychologist. I think it's time I heard about the genetics of race and intelligence from an actual geneticist. I want to take up Rushton's arguments one by one with Steve Jones, Professor of Genetics at University College London. Is it possible to arrive at a biological definition of race that would be acceptable to people in your field?
It's obviously true that there are geographic differences in the human population. That's obviously the case. Look at you and look at me. I mean, we look different. But if we were to look beneath the skin, there wouldn't be a complete split. So actually, the human race is remarkable compared to other primates in only one way. It's so boring. We're so similar to each other from place to place.
This is important. According to Jones, there are genetic differences between races, but they're not very big. What strikes him is how alike we are, which suggests environmental factors play a key role in IQ.
But at the same time, I mean, on the other side of the argument, one can't deny that there is hereditary components in IQ.
Oh no, I think you'd be extremely foolish to deny that there's a hereditary component in intelligence. It's extremely foolish to deny there's a hereditary component in almost anything. Most things have some heritability, as we say. You will probably someday find a few of the genes that underlie some of that heritability. But what I would tell you about race and IQ, I have no idea. I would imagine almost nothing.
What about some of the other things Rushton said? Can brain size really be correlated with IQ? Richard Nisbet has looked into this and come to a very different conclusion.
Have you, in your findings, seen things to show that there is no causal relation between brain size and intelligence?
I consider the whole brain size issue to be a red herring. It's one type of indirect evidence, which is all that Rushton has, in my opinion, in favor of his view. There is a group in Ecuador where some individuals have head sizes that are 4 standard deviations below the average. That's a lot. That's a huge difference. These people actually get better grades in school than the other people in their community.
Why do you say that Professor Rushton and others, who take the same line as him, that their evidence is indirect?
Well, let's compare it with what I would call direct evidence, of which there are a couple of types. They have to do with natural experiments. That is, experiments that occur without any scientist setting them up. In the U.S., you have an extremely good natural experiment due to the fact that about 20% of the genes in the so-called black population here are European. Now, if European genes are superior to black genes, then it ought to be the case that those blacks in this country with more European genes, and some blacks have literally most of European genes, ought to be brighter than those who have purely African genes. There's not a shred of evidence that this is true. It can be looked at in many different ways.
This is an interesting point. Since races are not fixed or separate, you can actually study how much European DNA a black person has. Now, if Rushton is right, you might think the brightest black kids might have more European DNA. In fact, the opposite can be the case.
There's a study of Chicago school children, black school children who had extremely high IQs, genius level IQs. Now, if there's a big genetic difference between the races, it just would have to be the case that these kids are going to be the ones who have a higher fraction of European genes than the black population in general. And that's not true.
It seems to me race is not a useful scientific category at all, a view shared by neuroscientist Stephen Rose.
The social definitions of race, black, white, for example, don't match the biological definitions. I mean, if you look at differences in gene frequencies, there are differences between, on average, between North Welsh and Southern Welsh people, but you wouldn't call the North Welsh a different race from the Southern Welsh people. There are differences between different groups of people in Africa, and yet what the racist language does is it groups all black Africans one group. And that makes no sense in biological terms, in genetic terms at all.
So why does he think this debate has run for so long?
Because we live in a racist society, it's very simple. The question about differences in intelligence between black people and white people wouldn't make any sense unless you live in a racist society.
So maybe it's towards society that I need to focus my attention in explaining the race gap in IQ. I remember something Les Henry said to me.
We're going to say that we want to absolutely get rid of this debate. The only way it's going to be done is for people to be honest. For those people who say that it is a redundant argument or it's not real, I would just say to them, come to one of the sessions that I do in any local school when you actually see black children who are afraid to achieve. They are supposedly underachieving badly. Now, one of the reasons why is when you talk to a lot of them, they think to be intelligent is to be white. To be intelligent is to act white. To speak a certain way, having a half-decent vocabulary is white. Reading a book is definitely white. And that's what underpins that for me, and that's what I break down to young people.
We had vast public investments in building the suburbs of America.
All right, so thoughts. Thoughts. Yes.
These are easily identifiable. I mean, so that if one feels compelled to categorize.
Okay, so if one feels compelled to categorize, it's easy to do. What else? Yes.
Those experts are those interpretation internationally. When you compare it to results in the US compared to the UK, you see the view.
Okay.
But it depends on the supervision of the person.
Okay. So there's a difference between perceptions in the U.S. and in Europe. Any other things that struck you as interesting? Yes.
It blows me away that this is even a discussion today. I thought it would come up one way.
But why is it a discussion today?
It's very relevant and prevalent.
It's very relevant and prevalent. Why? Fear. Fear of what? Fear of the truth.
Of the unknown.
For so long, particularly the truth in the Western world is that those in the West are right, and we are good, and we are just, and everyone else is a savage that we need to tame. We send missionaries out to save them so that they can be like us. Not realizing, it's funny, in this country in particular, we talk about black people and other minorities, and we talk about white people as the majority. But when we look globally, what do we know about white people? They are the minority, right? So flipping all of this stuff upside down, we're now getting to a place where we have to start telling the truth, which is we are no better than anybody else, and that we have the same problems, and so that we have to relate to each other in different ways. It was really interesting, the commentary around the election of Barack Obama around the world. You had dignitaries in France and in Italy and in Germany saying that this is the downfall of the white man. You know, and so I think there is that element of fear, but also we've been duped to keep ourselves afraid so that something else can occur. And I'll say this, and I don't care if people like me or don't like me. That's not important to me, but it is important for me to tell the truth. Why were slaves brought to the United States? Because a lot of times when we talk about this stuff, people give the inclination that the people who brought slaves over to the United States did it because they were evil and they were bad people.
That was the culture of the day.
They did it to make a profit. They did it to make a profit. The Native Americans were here. They tried to work with the Native Americans to get them to be slaves, but you can't. I mean, we learned this in Vietnam too. You can't fight a war on somebody else's territory and expect to win. So we couldn't get them to cooperate. So we snatched them from their tribal families and we put them in these schools to try to brainwash them so they could be Western like us. And then when that didn't work, we put them back on these isolated compounds called reservations because we had reserved that specially for them, right? Which happens to be on the worst land and all that kind of stuff. And then when they do figure out ways to like do stuff, we want to take a percentage of that too, because that's what we do. But it's important that we start telling the truth. So when we talk about this IQ thing, and this really grabs me, right? Because I find it very interesting that we keep talking about IQ when we talk about race and how race is so important to IQ. And I ask the question, IQ for what? For what?
Taking that test.
Right? For taking that test, for doing whatever is beneficial for the majority at the time. So for example, and I say IQ for what? Take me. I'm a relatively intelligent person. You put me on a farm, I'm an idiot. At the same time, you take one of those farm boys and you put him in downtown Minneapolis, he's an idiot. Right? Put me, you know, and so when we talk about IQ, what I don't want us to do is to get caught up in, you know, all of these statistics because the facts do not equal the truth. The truth is, as a human being, if I'm given the opportunity to work hard enough, I can't achieve anything. I could have been a Michael Jordan. I wasn't willing to work that hard. 8,000 shots a day? Oh no, I got too much stuff to do. You know, so I did see a hand. I did want to respond. Yes, ma'am, and I'll take your hand. Yeah, she was saying that on the res, your mother-in-law, her mother-in-law was a genius, had an 8th grade education, but she would call her when she needed stuff because she could make that happen. So yes, ma'am, now take your hand.
One thing that when the person thinks to change or to visualize what they can compare or apply where you grow up. But if you never move where you grow up and doesn't have a large vision, you see, it's hard.
Yeah.
And that's what is the matter.
A lot. She was saying that a lot of people get caught in their community where there's a small vision, and so you end up having a small life. But if you can go to a place where there's a large vision, then you increase your capacity. So yes, sir.
I was thinking earlier about why this goes on, but you guys are driving in listening to the news and no one has come to the session, and they're talking again about the haves versus the have-nots, and the small, over the Middle East, the small haves setting up things so they get more, and the have-nots not getting it, and then it's reflecting back to northern, to Ireland, and again it was the haves and have-nots, and so it's like, if it wasn't for race, wouldn't we pick something else, so the haves can keep the have-nots and get it?
So let's talk about what the real thing is. When we talk about this, we're not talking about the intelligence and all that kind of stuff. What we're really talking about is the haves and the have-nots. And we use the discussion of race to create those barriers that seem logical to us for our illogical behavior. Yes, ma'am, I saw your hand.
When a group of people feel superior, their actions are devoted to keeping other groups inferior. And if you acknowledge that we're not superior, then how do we have what we have versus letting maybe the other people get become the haves.
That's right.
And we will be depressed.
Well, yeah, how do we end up not feeling inferior if we're not superior?
Well, one of the things is we have to start telling the truth about who we are, that we have frailties, that we don't know everything, that and it's funny, someone, I got into kind of a fight and a debate about Black History Month. And because I find it ironic that it's the shortest month in the year that was selected to do, something I think is very important. And they asked me about the relevance, and I said, I don't think it's as relevant as it should be. And that this is my personal view, that we should have Black History Month every day we have regular history. So it should be a part of that. The Irish should be mentioned as a part of our history, and the Italian should be specifically mentioned as a part of our history, because what we end up talking about are these bland white folks that we can't identify with. Even other white folks can't identify with these folks, right? And so, yeah, we got into this fight, and I said, these accomplished dead Black people are not necessarily reaching our young people. They need people that they can see and touch. And so if you want to do some Black history, take a kid and have them go to work with you so they can see a real role model kind of thing. So, but she got, we got into a fight, and, I love her. She's got a different mission than I do, and that's all good. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, she just said that oftentimes in history, when you go through history, that the heroes are actually the oppressors, and and I say that that's definitely one way to take it. But what I would also offer is that it is important for everyone to feel good about who they are, that you are proud about who you are, and it's so funny. I was talking with a lady from the Star Tribune about one of the trainings that we have in Anoka County, and I haven't done it as often as I'd like to, but it's called the White American Experience, because we do a lot of diversity trainings on all other culture groups, and I think it's only fair to help folks understand the White American Experience, because it's not just this monolithic group that just showed up. Many of our great-grandparents weren't considered white, for those folks who call themselves white. They were, Polish, and they were Armenian, and they were Irish and German before they became white, and so I think it's important to understand how we've set up the conversation of race so that we can hide what's really going on and some of the other things. Yes, ma'am.
It's a little bit different topic, but my teenage daughter is in a leadership diversity group. She's the only white person in there, and I'm just kind of struggling too with how to keep not her identity, but her self-esteem, because I don't think the other kids are saying this, but I think she just kind of just thinking about it herself. It's like the white race is bad. We did a lot of bad things. So she's a minority in this diversity group, and she's not really thinking her race is so great. So yeah, we did some bad things, but I don't want her to feel bad about her race either.
Right. And a lot of people. Go ahead, ma'am.
I just moved here from Hawaii, a couple months ago. And I grew up in the Midwest, but when I moved there, I definitely felt racism, being Caucasian. But I am a quarter Chinese, and when people would find out that I'm Chinese, part Chinese, they treated me different.
Yep, because you down, girl. You down. What's up? Right.
Racism is everywhere, and I noticed like some ethnicities wanted to be, more like white people, and I said the same thing. You should be proud of who you are.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. I'll take it.
Has anyone ever figured out, well, we know history, but when you're in Ireland, whether Catholic or Protestant, you're Irish. When you're in England, you're English. When you're in Spain, come to America, and you're white, no longer French. The woman had a problem with, oh, I gotta remember, I'm not French, I'm white, what are you? I'm white now. And she had a problem with, I mean, because in France, where she grew up, and was her ethnicity and so on, she was French. But when you come to America, then you're white.
But the thing that's even stranger about that is that, you know, for a long time I couldn't say that I was American, but I'm American. You know, I have a passport and all that kind of stuff. But it was weird to say. But when I went overseas, I'm sure I was black to some people, but to the majority of the people that I encountered, I was American, and I was like, I'm American. I was like, yeah, I am, yeah. Although sometimes I was Canadian when it was appropriate to be. Like, hey. Yes, ma'am.
But wouldn't you say that's still, in America, that's still the process of keeping slaves in their place? That's still a brainwashing there. And the kids nowadays are so bright that they've seen it, and it's painful for the white children. They didn't do it, but they're in the situation, so we have to, as families, we have to work with our families individually and bring them up to let them know who they are. And so that then when they do get into this society, that they already know, wait a minute, no, that's not what I was told at home, you know. We have to start that cycle.
Yep.
Because the reason I feel so strong, I got so many races in me, I'm not sure who I am, you know. I mean, from Jewish to the African, you know, I have everything in me, so, but I'm a black American.
Yeah.
That's what I'm told.
And you know, if we did mitochondrial DNA and we followed our mitochondrial DNA, which is our mother's DNA, we would all go back to one strand. But before we got to that one strand, what we also would realize is that the people who we're sitting next to, who we think we look alike, we're less alike than the people who are different from us because of that mitochondrial DNA. All right? Yes, ma'am. Yep. So, let's cut to the chase, right? Race is designed to organize and separate people for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is profit. Profit, right?
I would say it's because innately, for some reason, we have a need to have a superiority.
And I would have said that had the research not shown me something different. Because what the research has shown me was that the concept of race started when this country started. When the United States started, one of the biggest tools that the Nazis used were the studies done in the United States to justify what they did. So the eugenics movement was an organization that was founded here in the United States to justify racism for the benefit of creating opportunities for profit. So, how do we fight against that? This is the way we fight against it. And I told this story the other day, and I'll just share it because I think it's appropriate for our conversation. What time are we? How much time do we have left? We have how much left? About 15 minutes? Okay. So I'm teaching high school, and we had separated our classes by gender for core classes, and then electives, the kids were together, the girls and the boys were together. And my class is one of those core classes. It was a leadership class. And so this particular day, we're talking about gender equity. And in this gender equity conversation, we're going, through some of the kind of activities and stuff that we did here. And in the middle of the class, one boy stands up and he says, "When I look at a girl, I look at what's on the inside." And what did the girl say? They're like, oh, you know. And the boys are like, oh man, you know, you gotta get some numbers tonight, and all this kind of stuff, right? And so they're high-fiving each other and they're laughing, and so we get back on task, and we continue throughout the rest of the conversation, and then the class ends and the girls go back to their classroom and the guys stay. I have about 15 minutes for reflection, so I'm writing the reflection questions up on the board, and I hear that same voice saying, man, did you see Keisha's booty? And then I'm like, ah. But it hit me all at once that the 45 minutes that we spent doing that workshop was a setup for this 15 minutes that I have with these boys. And so I taught these boys, and I said, you know, what about your sister? How does this relate? And we started really drilling down on those comments and came to something that was very valuable. And then I started thinking, what if, as a black man, I sat with my other black brothers and we talked about how we treat women and how we can change how women get treated. And then I had another epiphany. I was like, well, what if, as black people, we sat and talked about how we can relate differently and better with white people? And then it hit me. What if white people sat with white people and had conversations about how they can work better together to improve the lives of other folks? And it really struck me with this one question. As men, how many times, well, first of all, do we have women in the room? Okay. As women, do you have conversations about sexism with other women friends? Yeah. Is that an often conversation? I mean, is it something that comes up a lot, a little, none at all? Sometimes a little. Okay. All right. Do we have men in the room? All right. Now, I'm not asking you what you think or what you do, but maybe people you know or friends of friends, right? So, the men friends that you're around, how often do they have conversations about sexism? Hardly ever? Doesn't happen? Never? Sir? Never. If it's your school friends, you do. But if it's your outside friends, probably never. Do you see a problem with that, women? Yeah. Half the problem isn't thinking about the problem. Right? So it's my belief that if, as individual families, that we shore up, and I'm all about, and it sounds weird, I'm all about white pride. And I hesitate to say that because people might take it to that ugly, crazy, twisted place where, people are hurting other people. But it's important for people to be proud of who they are. And I realized that on a flight, right? Because what do the stewards and stewardesses tell you about the survival mechanism that comes down from the ceiling? That's right. Put the oxygen mask on first and then help somebody else. And in the case of your daughter, she needs to be proud of who she is because she needs to be 100% when she goes to battle those bullies. Right? She needs to be proud of who she is. And once we're able to be proud ourselves, then we allow other people to be proud. It's amazing to me the number of folks who have who are anti, all sorts of immigrant groups and that kind of stuff, and they know in their hearts of hearts that they didn't just show up, that they came from someplace. But since we have societal amnesia, it's easy to forget that you were once an immigrant yourself. Even Native Americans came from someplace, right? And so it's important that we relate to those immigrant stories and take responsibility for the sphere of influences that we have around ourselves. So that's that. Race is designed to organize us for the use of profit. And I will not be used as a tool for somebody to profit unless they're paying me. That's the American way, right? Any questions, comments, observations?
Where's your name at in this? I can't find it.
Yep. My name is Andre Cohen, and my website and stuff is at the bottom of those documents, so you can contact me there. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, you should just tell them what your genus and species is. Right? Yeah, so her comment was, if you're curious about someone's background, ask them about their background. Don't ask what they are. You know, what are you? And yes, ma'am.
Culture where you live, because in Hawaii, everybody, they always ask what's your ethnicity.
But is that different? Is saying what is your ethnicity different than saying what are you? Yeah.
That's what I thought of.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Why is that important? Right? Yes. Yes, ma'am.
There's a part of me that thinks, you know what, someday, in a way, will be moved, because there'll be so much, there will be no dual races. Like, it's gonna change by itself, and it changes.
Yep.
But the other part is, I heard you, that this is really about love, and that there are so many things that people who are looking for profit, so many things that they will do or use for that.
Yeah, and typically our societal fears are used to garner our behavior towards a product or some kind of system that is designed to get some kind of profit. You know, if you're afraid of that neighborhood, then you will pay an exorbitant amount for the same house in this neighborhood. If you're afraid of getting, heart disease, then you'll take this pill because that will, if you're afraid that your partner won't love you, then you take this pill and it'll stimulate some things so that they will love you. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I mean, we are a human family. One of the biggest things, and this is what I'll close with, that this fear is designed to spark, is to think that we will have to continue the system that's been created. And that's not true. We can find a different way to relate to each other. As these demographics change, as our world shifts, we get to redefine it. At any point that we give that up, then we've lost. All right? We get to define who we are, who we have relationships with, how those relationships go, how we create equity together. We get to define that. It's not something that somebody else tells us. Our politicians, they work for us, for real. Like, our tax money goes to pay for their mansions and their townhouses, right? And we can fire them if they're not doing what we want them to do. I love the Tea Party. I don't like what they do sometimes, but I like that concept because citizens have said, we're going to rise up and do something. And so I'd encourage you to figure out how do you rise up in your own family? How do you rise up with the people that you're around in your sphere of influence? You can fight battles on my behalf that I will never know exist. And guess what I'm doing for you? The same thing. My name is Andre Cohen. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. So if you can fill out your evaluations and put those back there. I'm on Facebook if you want to be friends. You can be friends. I do. Yeah. And those videos are all up there. They're all categorized. Eric, good to meet you. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, I'm not sure.
They're in the back on the.
On the back, okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, no.
I need this too.
It's so funny. Yep. And with the census, the funny thing about it is there's only been 2 years, two censuses where the race categories have been the same. In all the years I've been doing the census.
I obviously don't live that, and when I go to Texas to visit my relatives, they laugh because I'm the white girl, but it's all to me about gender. And I just get angry being home because it's all the men. And so you gave me a real interesting perspective there about gender. So,
Well, you need to stand here a minute while I introduce myself. Hi, I'm Renee Brown. I'm a white girl with a black girl's body. And my family told me this all the time. Why? Because of the way I speak, the way I carry myself, the jobs I have, the stuff that I have in my home. But I'm African American, Louisiana.
All right, where is it? Oh, okay, yeah. Across the lake from New Orleans. Right. Yeah,
So, no,
yeah,
you
I know.
understand? Yeah.
I'm totally, very few people believe me.
But it's not what they believe, it's what you know.
It's what
What you know and how you continue to carry yourself.
and the fruit that you multiply outside of yourself.
Thank you. You're an excellent speaker.
Oh, my friends. All my friends. Are like all these people that were just in here. I have a variety. Stick to it. Well, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
And another thing that I wanted to share with you that I'm quite sure you may understand, but then you may not. I have 2 sons. Okay, one is mixed with Irish, black and white, and then the other one is mixed with Indian, Mexican, and black. And I send them to 80% Asian, well, really 98% Asian and mom school. Do you understand why?
So they get a breadth of diversity.
Thank you. And my family keeps asking me, why do you send them? Because they already know how to be black. We teach them that every day.
Well, and the other thing is, because I used to, when I would work with biracial kids, when I was younger, I'd be like, aren't they act black enough? What's up with that?
They don't even know. They don't know that they're.
But the thing is, the world will teach you about what it means to be black. It was funny, somebody said, well, why don't we call Barack Obama, biracial, or why don't we call him white? It's not that. He can call himself whatever he wants to call him.
He done heard it all.
It's what y'all call him. I mean all of us call him. That determines what his racial background is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So we learned. It was nice meeting you. Great speaker.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So how can I make you the speaker?
Go to my website, fill out the form, make it happen.
My daughter goes to alternative school.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
I think they all
Yeah.
need it.
No, I mean the school that I worked, the charter school where I worked it wasn't an alternative school, but we had alternative school students as a part of the school. So, yeah. So I think I have some stuff that can reach them. Yep. Cool.
Good, this will help me when I go to Chicago again.
Yeah.
My granddad's a Black Panther.
Oh, really?
I didn't fit into that.
That's all right,
Yeah, he'll live with it.
Yeah. He'll have to.
She's 15. He can't tell her anything.
Right.
Well, yeah.
So, good. Not a problem. Good to meet you. Hello.
I'm a supervisor in a food company.
Yes.
And I've got a wonderful diverse team. 95% of my staff are understanding and acknowledging and accepting of our diverse team, but I've got a couple that I'm struggling with lately. I've got one in particular who basically is using her experiences with individuals to judge. You know what I mean? You know, and I'm having a hard time with how to acknowledge her feelings regarding, this staff who didn't do that and whatever, and breaking that, crossing that bridge over to everybody who looks, talks, acts, whatever, like this, is going to do the same thing. Do you have any advice for coaching this person?
Yeah.
I mean, right now we're at an HR standpoint where I'm telling her, knock it the hell off, you're going to fight. But from a broader standpoint of the world, her getting fired over being a brat to staff isn't going to do her long term any good.
Send her to me. Send her to me.
I mean, she's a little petite, skinny blonde girl, and it's just the girl has had so many things go right for her that she doesn't have any idea how many privileges that she has, let alone her race.
Yeah.
But just being petite and pretty and blonde and
And
all
that,
of those things. And
that
then,
stuff works until it doesn't work anymore. Until you're not.
Absolutely.
Till,
Until people realize that you're a freaking idiot.
yeah. Or you lose your looks. You lose
Right?
your
Yeah, your ass expands and
petiteness.
suddenly you're not pretty anymore.
Right.
Yeah. She's a giant pain in my ass, and it drives me crazy because it goes against everything. I mean, I can have a conversation about this staff who did not do well on their own, that's fine. But when we jump to this idea that, all overnight stuff or all black overnight stuff or whatever, it's like, no. I can point out just as many black overnights who did a damn good job as I can people who didn't. So obviously that doesn't work, but
Is she been written up? I mean, are you okay?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is it possible? Is it possible to add me to her plan?
Certainly could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because again, I mean, if it's a tardy problem that I have with the staff, I can write you up, but that's not going to solve it. I
Right.
want to know, why are you tardy? Am I
Right.
scheduling you too close to class? Are
Yep.
you not leaving on time? Do we need to set more alarms?
Yep.
That's my process when I'm writing warnings. I really want to help you get over this. Well, I'm a little bit at a loss with this one. And my HR department is saying, she just needs to stop. Well, I agree, we need to give her some tools.
Yeah.
If she could just stop, she would be
She
doing
would.
this in the first place.
Yeah.
She goes to college. She's
Yeah.
been through diversity courses. She
Yeah.
obviously doesn't get it. And
she
she's
probably
so
went-
closed-minded that that's the hard part is she needs
And she
to be
probably
blinded to
had
it.
the diversity thing. Where did she go to school? Yeah, they're real hard. They're real hard. They're diversity folks.
Well, we've got,
Create fault and blame
Yes.
for white folks.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I would see why she doesn't get it because
Right.
she shut down.
Yeah. And it's easy to think like, well, that was my answer. The way that they teach at state, rather than we've all done things. We've all laughed at a dumb joke and gone, that probably wasn't funny. Probably wasn't the right thing to do. But it's those acknowledgments of each and every person every single day that makes everything better. Nobody is perfect.
Yeah.
So
what I would suggest is that I do some kind of consultation with her as a part of her HR plan thing, and we can do it. Where are you?
I'm up at Innocent House.
Okay, sweet. So I'm in Anoka, so
Okay.
45 minutes away. We can do it in person, or we can do it over Skype.
Yeah.
I've done some interventions using Skype, using the internet. So any way you want to kind of write me in or write that up,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
So,
I gotta obviously bring it to hire people and
Yeah.
stuff, but even if it's not for this individual in particular, I think that it's something that we should be looking towards is, again, how do we solve this problem?
Yeah.
Because it's not gonna go away.
No, and if you can get to the root, I mean, if you really can get to the root, then you don't have to worry about trimming these trees. You don't have to worry about the dandelions.
Well, we're never gonna get away from bad experiences. Again, my big thing is moving from one bad experience to judging everybody.
Yeah.
That's the root of the issue.
Yeah. So, cool. And your name again is?
Megan.
Megan. All right.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you as well. So,
Thank you.
Megan, make sure you go on my website, log in, or send me an email through there,
Perfect.
and then we can orchestrate this.
Awesome. Take
All right,
care. Thank you.